Hello everyone, and welcome to the IFST Food Risk Management Systems Working Group webinar on Digitization, turning quality data into quality information. My name is Andy Kerridge. I'm a member of the Food Risk Management Systems Working Group and Vice Chair of IFST's Food Safety Special Interest Group. IFST's Food Risk Management Systems Working Group aims to review how the food industry can best leverage existing and new technological opportunities for improved information exchange and risk intelligence, therefore enhancing both risk assessment and risk management capabilities, and to scope food risk management verification approaches fit for the future. This webinar is the first in a short series exploring the application of new technologies to food systems risk management. Please keep an eye on the IFST's event page for more details of the next webinars. Just a short point about digitization or digitalization. Digitization is the process of converting information from a physical format into a digital one. When this process is leveraged to improve business processes, it is called digitalization. Feel free to make comments and ask questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A function, which should be at the bottom of your screen. There will be a Q&A session after the presentation where we will respond to as many of these questions as possible. I will ask the speakers your questions. Our speakers today are Matt Raymond, Sector Lead Agri-Food at the MTC, and Bárbara Serra, Head of Technical Compliance at SH Pratt Group. Matt has worked for 15 years designing, developing and installing industrial production machinery before moving to the MTC. In his 5 years at the MTC, he has pushed for the development of solutions for the agri-food sector that focus on productivity, technology adoption and cross-sector learning. This has now meant that the MTC has a wide range of projects and programs spanning the technology readiness level from Innovate UK funded programs, as well as a series of high TRL or technology readiness level industrial projects impacting directly on production. Bárbara has started her career as an agronomist working for Vitacres in Portugal. Since then, she's been working for the last 20 years in several fresh produce companies in quality and technical roles, always trying to improve systems. She is currently Head of Technical Compliance at SH Pratt Group, where she is aiming to continuously improve the food safety culture and enhance others to understand the implications of compliance by optimizing systems. For further information on the biographies, please look on the IFST's website. But without further ado, I will hand over to our first speaker, Matt Raymond. Over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, for that introduction. Okay, so I'm going to take you through what we would call Digitalization 101. Okay, so I really want to talk about my experience in the food and drink sector and also the challenges that I've come across in how businesses have approached going digital, some of the traps to watch out for, and also some of the areas that you might want to think about going forward. And hopefully what this presentation will do will get you thinking about continuing your digital journey, or maybe indeed starting that. So broken into two sections. The first bit's going to really introduce some ideas and thoughts about the technology techniques and so on, and I hopefully throw some anecdotes in there as well. And then also I've got a second separate slide, which is all about the DRL tool, where you can start your own journey even during a coffee break. Okay, so I work for the Catapults, and you may not know that there is a Catapult network strategy, but it is a government strategy funded by BAID, Innovate UK, and there are several Catapults around the UK. And I happen to work for the high value manufacturing Catapult. But it's worth mentioning that within the Catapult network, there are actually 3 others who also work quite a lot in the food and drink sector. And it's definitely worth you knowing about them, because I also work with those Catapults. We share projects and we make sure that we collaborate and coordinate together to ensure that we actually have a sensible and coherent offer to the food industry. So firstly, I'd obviously have to mention the satellite one. Let's start at the top. So the satellite applications Catapult really is focused on that end-to-end connectivity, very much, obviously looking at Earth observation and so on, and then again through that whole transport piece and of course much more. Adding to that is then the Connected Places Catapult. Now, the Connected Places area is really thinking about transport, logistics, extra logistics, intralogistics, the future of delivery and so on. And then, of course, the overarching one really is the Digital Catapult. And obviously what we're talking about today very much resonates with the work that we do with Ben and the team out of London. And it's worth bearing in mind that I believe that no one catapult will solve all of the challenges for the food and drink sector, but I think by working together, that definitely makes sense. And as a group, we are actively working with the Food and Drink Sector Council to try to put something in place for the food and drink cluster. So coming on to high value manufacturing. So the high value manufacturing catapult has multiple locations around the UK. And we really do cover all of the UK with the exception of Northern Ireland. We have a location in Scotland, AFRC. We have a location in Wales, AMRC Wales. We also have locations in the Southwest and London and so on. So it's worth bearing in mind that we are actually a national reach for manufacturing. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that high value manufacturing initially wasn't aimed at food and drink, but I'd like to think I've done a lot to try and turn the tide on that, to really get the investment and the understanding of the catapults that food and drink is a sector that needs heavy investment of technology, but may not necessarily be on very high value items per se, but high volume items. And I think there's a whole series of interesting challenges in that space as well. So just going through some of the names, AFRC I've already mentioned in Scotland. We have AMRC and Nuclear AMRC. They have a facility in both North Wales and Sheffield. CPI in the northeast. Ourselves, MTC, we're in Coventry with the Warwick Manufacturing Group, WMG. So we're not too far apart from each other. Also, we have the NCC down in Bristol. And it's worth really engaging with the catapults because we can help you with a lot of the technology adoption. Now, we are classed as an RTO, Research and Technology Organisation. So, within Innovate bids and so on, we can work with you quite well there as well. You notice there isn't one actually purely focused on food. We're really focused on manufacturing, and a lot of what I'm going to talk today will be focused around the manufacturing of food products. So unusually for a food science conference, I'm not going to talk about food science. I don't know much about that, but I'm definitely going to be talking to you about how we can help on the manufacturing side. And I think I really like you to think about how you might be able to adapt your skills and techniques and maybe help your business on its digital journey, because I think we've all got a part to play. But when we look about the coordination of those catapults, you can see that obviously the overarching one is digital. We've got a really big value chain that we can work on, and then obviously satellite sits as part of that, Connected Places, and then ourselves. And we can really help in all spaces, from traceability and monitoring, connectivity, analytics modeling, right the way through to manufacturing technologies and applications. So we're quite a wide-ranging group of centres. We employ a lot of people, but also we've got a lot of skills and capability. Okay. But it's worth bearing in mind that when we think about going to digital, it's worth thinking about what does the benchmark for industry look like? Are we actually as far behind as often people suggest? And I think it would be wrong to say that the sector isn't using digital systems. And in my experience, it's really the opposite. And that is, there is a vast array of digital systems in use for both running a facility, scheduling and planning, controlling the facility, as then also into the QA and the quality systems and the assurance systems that are required for the products. And there really are a large amount of those. And my experience really has shown that those software systems are currently diverging, but also what's increasing with that is the number of paper-based systems. So there is a lot of paper-based systems. There's a lot of paper in the gaps. There's a lot of what we call human in the loop, i.e. operations that need to happen by people. And not necessarily automatic processes. And when you look at the aerospace tech and the automotive tech, they're very much in that space of a lot of it is automated. Okay. So I would say it could be argued that there is already enough tools within the food and drink industry so that it may already be digital enough, but there's very poor levels of connectivity. And often what you end up with these is what I call like silo software for silo functions. So there's a bit of software that does this for a function that does that. There's another bit of software that does this and another bit of software that does this, and so on and so forth. But there's very little connectivity between those pieces. It's particularly the case where businesses have grown through acquisition and they've taken on the production and process, facilities that were, already in that area. also, it's particularly relevant for businesses where they've expanded really rapidly, and they've suddenly found that Excel and a whiteboard is probably not quite cutting it. And I also think, as I said earlier, there's a bit of a divergent approach to software where food and drink businesses are getting more software. They're not necessarily on a plan to actually narrow that software down. And a bit of research that I've done just myself over the last, I'd say, 12 months is that on average, most of the software tends to sit around the office or the back office facilities. But when you actually look, the things like sales and invoicing are still quite heavily dominated by software. There's lots of different bits of software for that. Same with manufacturing management. And then depending on how many suppliers you've got in your distribution chain, there can be a reduced number there. So there really is a tend to have more software in the office than there is on the production facility. But I would argue that we actually need more software in the production facility than we do in the office. So why should we go digital? Well, we should think about digital tools to help us. And I think if we think about this carefully and strategically, we can actually make software work for us, okay? And I think there is a level of digital blindness that's certainly within the food and drink sector, because there is a depth of understanding that isn't necessarily there. But it's also worth bearing in mind that there is a level at which we may understand how our factory works, but then there'll be several levels beneath that which also have systems that are digitally enabled. And I think there's a bit of a hidden story here around smaller, unconnected systems that aren't necessarily within the purview of the business, because there's a level of granularity that's just not approached. The challenge is that this level as well is diverging. So there are more systems in here, but there are also greater opportunities for these smaller systems to be connected to the overall food production facility, but they're often not. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the suppliers of the components have been pushing for things like Industry 4, smart connected solutions, Internet of Things, and so on for many, many years now. And often these systems are capable and ready to go, but the overarching infrastructure within the food facility is not ready for that kind of connectivity. And just to give a good example, I said manufacturing management earlier on the slide, on average has around about, 8 or 9 different bits of software for scheduling, production maintenance, predictive maintenance, maybe OEE, your equipment effectiveness. You've also got your other bits of software tracing, personnel and so on. But then below that, those 8 big bits of software, you then have factory floor systems, and often those aren't connected because they might be too old to be connected. Perhaps they don't have digital systems. Maybe the system's a black box, so that means you don't necessarily know how they work, they just kind of work. There's also a variation between what your suppliers might provide. So they might provide this because it's of this particular price, or it might be bought on a different price because, this one's cheaper. It offers the same functionality, therefore we'll just go with that one. So there's no necessary standard. And also the suppliers constantly upgrade their systems, therefore you're getting the latest technology. And I've seen some great examples of some very new and very clever bits of equipment that aren't actually connected to anything whatsoever, and they just rely on maybe an emergency stop that might stop the conveyor, but not always the case in my experience. There's also an issue around engineering team skills. Have you got the skills to actually use this stuff? There's also a lower level of business impact. So, maybe by connecting the conveyor to another conveyor using some kind of digital system is cool. What does it really do? Not a great deal. So why bother? And then also on top of that, there is a complexity of connectivity. Like, how is it we can connect these systems together? Do they have the same plugs and sockets? Can I actually get a signal there, and so on and so forth? So it's worth bearing in mind that even underneath those big bubbles that I showed earlier, supply chain management, sales invoicing, and office software, there's then another big tree of additional pieces of software that are also in use. So it's not a particularly straightforward journey. So thinking about moving towards a digital approach, one of the challenges is I'm often asked, what's in it for the business? Why should I do it? Okay, what's the business case? So really a question to answer is how we make the systems that you have, how their connectivity could work for you, how maybe reducing the number of pieces of software may work for you as well. And one of the challenges we have is that we've got to reframe that conversation to be centered around business benefits. Now, often what we find is that people buy stuff because it's fancy, it's got flashing lights, and it's got, you can connect your iPad to it, or you can connect your phone to it. It's my experience getting a phone and an iPad can be very difficult into, say, high care, for example, not impossible, but very challenging. because of the audit process, but also, you don't necessarily want to be, handling a phone maybe right next to a food production environment. So there's lots of different challenges around this. So we've got to think about what the business benefits are. And the benefits really, when the systems are working, as everybody knows, is increase in productivity, reduction in waste, faster or reduced changeovers, i.e. you've got greater uptime, greater productivity, continuous quality control. So that's measuring the product all the time, not just at your discrete interventions. Increased process transparency, so reduction in those black box systems, flexibility, and so on and so forth. And I would imagine over the last few months, some, if not all of these, would have been discussed at a senior level within the business on how we can improve it. So I think over the last few years, we say we've become aware, but I've certainly become aware of one of the major impediments that there is within in factories, especially doing this journey. Institute of Food Science, I'm hoping we haven't got too many IT professionals here, so I'm going to have a bit of a go that there is a real big disconnect between the IT teams within businesses and the factory production teams. Okay, and I say factory team, that's basically often the people that are based at the site, because often we found that the IT teams are not based at the production site. They could be based remotely. That's the benefit of it, or they may not even be based in the same country. Obviously, that's an even bigger challenge. One of the things we've discovered is that when you're thinking about planning your digital journey, the first thing you've got to do is really get the IT team on board, okay? And we've really got to turn it into a productive working relationship and try to get away from this producer-consumer thing. And that is, we're not just consuming laptops or Windows or planning software or anything like that. We're not just rolling out, or they're not just responsible for rolling out software. They're actually responsible for a jointly created vision and strategy as to where you're going with digital. Now, when you're working with catapults or universities or any tech provider, if you've got some strategy or some roadmap, something where you've thought about where are we headed, okay, even, which I think is a great start, is okay, what software have we actually got? Okay, which ones do we actually need? And I tell you, you've probably got some software at your facility which is costing you a fortune in licenses, and you might not even be using it. Okay, so you've really got to turn that tide around and get under control what software we have, which ones are actually driving value to the business, which ones we can get rid of, and can we make some smart connections between them? So it could be the case that you need to do very little to actually increase your productivity. You just need to start connecting those systems together, which is why I say a jointly created roadmap between the business, for the production business, as well as the IT team, with a focus on connectivity, on the factory, up and down supply chains and so on, is also important. I think also on top of that, so once you've got that roadmap, I think that will help any food business become more confident that digital tools will enable the business and not necessarily become a threat. And maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, we heard lots of comments about stay off the cloud and, they're going to steal our information. But don't forget, information that's stored, on the cloud is just data. Okay, it doesn't contain any secrets. It's just data. And unless you know what those links are, it won't make any benefit to anybody who may be wanting to steal your recipes. So just bear in mind, again, a good strategy will help you handle not only the connectivity, productivity and efficiency, but will also help around security and so on. It will also help when you are thinking about specifying more or different software. You can actually go to your suppliers with a defined software spec saying this is what we expect and these are our types of systems that connect into it. And don't forget, very basic stuff that's kind of off the shelf these days, business intelligence tools, cloud tools, dashboard tools on portable, or desktop equipment, that's all pretty much available these days off the shelf. And a lot of production machinery comes with it. It's not just about going to the machine and tapping away on the HMI. It's all about, remote connecting and using data to gain valuable insights. Because once you start creating that digital lake of data, you can start doing some very, very interesting things with it. And more than anything, the one thing we all want to do is actually drive some value from that. Now, based on average audience, now fortunately the food industry is the same as any industry, where a lot of us are technology transfers into that, which is we didn't necessarily grow up with computers in the home, or we may have, I don't know, as we were leaving home, perhaps going to university, college, etc., had a computer in the home. So we're not native to having a technology around us. And that's certainly the case that I've seen at the C level, the exec level, and the board level, which is where often there can be a level of skepticism around using technology or digital tools. We used it in paper in my day. Why do we need to change, and all that type of stuff? And that can be very tough, and that's really where moving to a digital space is definitely as much as a cultural journey as it is a technological journey. And often it tends to be driven by the more technology savvy, those who are confident with it, and those who are promoters of it. Personally, I think it's a great time to do it because the industry itself, I think, is moving towards increased levels of personalization, more customized products for specialist diets. I think I've seen a big change, obviously, over the last 3 or 4 months, reduction in production volumes, but maybe a reduction also in the SKU counts as well, so that companies are kind of shrinking that complexity. So now is a really good time to think about digital, because it may be the case that your product portfolio is maybe the smallest it's ever been, but perhaps just focused around a core of a few products. However, once we come out of this situation, it's more than likely that customers will be buying in a very different way. And I think changes in consumer behavior will be driving the way in which the factories respond. And I'm fairly sure that there's quite a lot of food factories out there that have been caught short by the sudden lockdown and challenges in connectivity. And I'll obviously touch upon that in my later case study. I personally think it's also worth, when you're thinking about your digitalization journey, and especially that 101, real basic one, is that there'll always be hype around the technology. And I think as a business, you need to make sensible choices that are beneficial to the business, not just interesting. But I thought, as a Catapult, we are working on some leading edge technology. So I thought, well, share that with you so you can have a look. I'm sure you've read it already. Things like a food factory digital twin. So this is a thinking model of the food factory that can dynamically react to changes in the food factory itself and help you with things like planning and scheduling and recipe control as well. So predicting, how the factory will behave based on a shutdown or a production line, running the line slower or faster just to keep up with different types of machines to ensure you have seamless transitions. Again, that's something that's definitely possible and something we're working on. Predictive recipe control, so that's looking at ingredients and then making changes to the production system because those ingredients might have a different sugar, fat, salt content. Definitely something we can do. Remote presence, mixed reality, again, we'll see a case study on that soon. Using AI, so obviously a lot about AI. One of the big challenges, how do I get that? But then using it for things like continuous quality control, looking at product through cameras, learning what good looks like. Again, a lot of this stuff is off the shelf. Doing more with CCTV, so you can look at your processes and lines, food factory in a box, and then things, much bigger challenges around end-to-end supply chain and food and drink production value chain. And that's really where we as a Catapult group work together, because those are big challenges and currently tend to be more in the Innovate UK or the Horizon Europe type challenges and funding programs, but certainly something that will be coming to the food industry, certainly in this decade, without a doubt. So if you think about the technologies that are out there and why it's worth going digital and why you might get value from it, then the big thing I think is that as a business, if you haven't got one, you should really be thinking about creating a roadmap. Now, while the Catapults can help you do that, of course, that's not a problem. Loads of other consultants can. I think it's worth, as I said, really early on, just drawing a network diagram of what bits of software you've got and how it connects together. And try to do that for all of your different sites if you have more than one. And you may be surprised on the duplication, on the redundancy, and the lack of connectivity you have between your systems. But I mean do everything, and that is from the factory floor to the office. Okay, so it's the whole system, the whole suite. Definitely that will help you understand where you are. And creating that map I think is essential to understand the interactions, okay? But also don't forget the hardware layer as well. So that is, think about your site-wide connectivity. What connectivity do you have, okay? How good is it? Because don't forget, it's all well and good having systems that are wirelessly enabled, or maybe they're wired, who knows? But if you haven't got the infrastructure there to pick it up, or you've got way too much noise, it can become a challenge. And don't forget, if you are in high care running a box within a box, that attenuation of that second box can be a major issue. And if you're not already in a program of rolling out Wi-Fi ports inside those facilities, now may be a great time to think about it. One of the other things to think about is is considering your supply team as well. So one of the things we've often found is that although the factory itself may be digitally connected, the companies that are supplying it to you are sending you bits of paper. Okay, so there's lots of keying and so on required as products come in, or maybe just a barcode read. So especially when I talk a bit later about the help available, if your suppliers are in the SME space, it might be an idea to help them become more digital so that you can become more digital yourself. Okay, and again, it's also worth looking at post-factory and how it connects to the consumer. As I said earlier, beware of the hype curve and make sure that you're adopting the technologies that are suitable for the business need. Like I said, and I've said this several times, start with your roadmap, start with your connectivity diagram, and then start looking at where you can make what I would say quick wins by making simple changes, and then start planning future for the future. And when you are doing your future plans, please don't forget about the skills agenda, because often it's the digital skills level that can be quite low, which is a bigger challenge. And that, to my mind, is actually a change in mindset as to who you recruit to come and work in a food factory. Okay. When you look at aerospace and automotive, some of their biggest recruiting at the minute is machine learning, computer scientists, data scientists, because of the data that's being produced by things like self-driving cars, self-awareness systems, and so on. So the real big expansion at the minute within automotive is around that space, and I think food and drink are also ideally placed to start recruiting people who have that particular skill set. So thinking about that, it would be worth going through a couple of simple case studies. The first one is a technology transfer case study from Harris RCS. They're an aerospace business, and through one of our REACH programs, our SME REACH program, we basically went into their business. We helped them understand and analyze their business systems. We've helped them create some new digital dashboarding tools. We've helped them with things like Lean and Kaizen and Six Sigma and so on, which a lot of larger businesses are all over, but the smaller SME businesses often don't have the skill, time or resource to do stuff like that. So again, that's well worthwhile. But as you can see, that had an actual direct business benefit around productivity, completing products in time, receiving supplier excellence awards, and also upskilling the staff. So it's well worth thinking that when you move companies on their digital journey, it's all about trying to get the business benefits out. I want productivity, I want reduced changeovers, and so on. So trying to come with a specification of where it is you'd like to get to. Now, obviously, you have to be realistic in that as well. Okay. So hopefully that's a good example of an SME business. In the aerospace business, which a lot of us would take to be highly digitized, it isn't necessarily, because again, there's a lot of small companies in that supply chain, and a lot of them who are looking for help, even now, perhaps when they've had a pretty hard last 4 or 5 months. So moving on to say a bigger case study, and this is one for Cargill Protein Europe, and I would definitely say thank you to Hayden Mann, who's helped me with this case study, and Steve Butterworth as well, and also allow me to present it. I've been asking them to do this for a while, and I'm delighted to be able to share it with you. Now, what you'll see here is we've got one of the Cargill team photographing himself, because obviously we couldn't get there to take the photo. And what he's wearing is the normal PPE, as you can see on the right-hand image, but his PPE is slightly different in as much as his hard hat helmet is fitted out with the HoloLens 2 device. And effectively, the idea of that was to do remote presence. So during the lockdown, there was an issue with a lot of companies getting people on site who may be not site-based. Maybe they were contractors, or perhaps they were required for production support, but perhaps weren't based at that location, or indeed in the UK. And the challenge is, how do you get those people on site so that you can see, you can show them, they can see what you can see, and also interact with you directly. So we already had a development roadmap with Cargill on the use of mixed reality headsets and also digital. And as the pandemic hit, Cargill moved really quickly to buy 2 of these Trimble headsets. Now, it's worth bearing in mind, these headsets are construction industry headsets, okay? And with our support and also their technical team support, they made those headsets ready for food production and deployed them very quickly to their site at Wolverhampton. And since then, they've used them loads of times for remote customer visits, remote employee visits, so there's an awful lot they've been using these headsets for. Okay. Now, there have been some very interesting learning points, and I'm hopeful that there'll be a more in-depth case study soon. But one of the challenges was around connectivity. I mentioned earlier about Wi-Fi points, that was an issue. And again, trying to get the streaming quality from good to excellent, because of course they're often looking at fine detail. And again, for them, one of the challenges was around the infrastructure and the building. It's a massive facility, and obviously it needs a large amount of connectivity and bandwidth. And again, that just the business just wasn't ready for that at the time, but moved really quickly to actually address that. And it was great. It's actually surprising how quickly the business could move and all get together with everyone really focused on one area. And one of the other issues they have still is around the voice quality, and that's something that we're talking to them on. And also on how you move your head and trying to be more like a cameraman rather than you just talking as you normally would. So there's a lot of things that the staff have had to learn. There's a lot of things that the business has had to learn. But I think it's been a really interesting journey for the business. And I'm sure it's something that we'll hear more about. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing more of those systems in food and drink production. So thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully it's been a bit of a download, a bit of a thought provoker. Hopefully you've taken away a couple of thoughts, maybe one or two. And what I'll do now is I'll hand over to Bárbara, who will share with us her digitalization journey.
Thank you, Matt. I will try to explain the journey SH Pratt has gone through with the digitization of our systems. What drove SH Pratt to change to digital? The main reasons for this change was the fact that we had a small technical team, we had an increased number of audits, some of them becoming unannounced, we had a complex supply chain. At the time, we had around 12 direct suppliers based in Central and South America, which doesn't seem much, but banana production is mainly done by small growers that work with associations or groups. So from the 12 suppliers, we had around approximately 500 growers to do due diligence for. So, how did our systems look like prior digitization? Pratt had a paper-based system, and compliance was being managed basically by the technical team. Our food safety and quality manual was a Word document, which we had 2 paper copies in the QC office in case employees need to consult. Document control was done using an Excel document that would keep a record of what version was in use and the reason for amendment. Our HACCP team input was not really capturing the interaction of all departments and was such a tick kind of exercise. Supplier management due diligence was complex, not only because of location where growers are, but also because of the huge numbers of growers we need to verify. Growers had to be Global Gap certified and then could also be organic, fair trade or Rainforest Alliance certified. To verify all these certificates was time consuming, as also some of the documentation was in Spanish, so we have situations with double language, which was not easy. In terms of the non-conformance and corrective actions, there were very few records. Root cause analysis was not performed, which meant the issues that caused the non-conformance were not being addressed correctly, and was very difficult to keep track of all corrective actions and comply with deadlines. On the next few slides, I will show some examples of what our system looked like. This is an example of our document control log. As you can see for document number 313A, the last time this document was reviewed was May 2015. And obviously, this document was missed in the 3 years review requirement for specifications, as this record was from November 2019. and document 313A still present its last review date from May 2015, which is over the 3 years period. This was our supplier management document. This is a short version of it, but although we had colors associated with dates, it was still very difficult to keep track of all the certification. This is our root cause action plan, which was not practical and therefore departments were not using it as often as they should. These are examples of the calibration records we were using at the time. In here, you can see an example of our cleaning records. So, what was the steps we had to make to start the process? First, we had to research which type of softwares were in the market and then choose one that we felt would help the continuous improvement we needed. After choosing the software, we made a presentation to the senior management team, highlighting the benefits to change to this new way of working. When we obtained the approval of the senior management team, we started implementing the process and the journey started. The total duration of the project lasted 12 months. We started implementation in January 2018. We had several meetings with the software team to discuss how the project should be implemented according to our needs, and this was achieved by having a phased approach to the whole process. First and most important step was the collection of master data to transfer to the new software. During this step, we always had total support of the software team. We then start working the data module by module, having monthly meetings with the software team to liaise any issues that would have come up. What did we need to do during the process? We had to train staff as modules were released. We had to coach staff to help them to get used to the new system. And obviously, we had to help in the implementation of a new way of work and engage the teams that were not used to have to record things as the new system was presenting to them. So, how does the system look like after digitization? We now operate a cloud-based system where compliance is coached by the technical team but is managed by all departments. The Food Safety and Quality Manual is now available in the platform for all members of staff with access to a computer. So let me present some examples of what the system looks like now. Document control is managed by the system, prompting notifications when documents need to be reviewed. HACCP requires input and approval of all members of the team before it is available to the other members of the business, and therefore broaden the discussion and engagement within the team. Supplier management is still complex, but now the system prompts the review of certificates, which release time to manage other aspects of supplier management. The number of non-conformances being recorded has increased. Root cause analysis is a mandatory requirement to be fulfilled before we can progress with the corrective action. So we are seeing issues being properly dealt with. Deadlines for corrective actions are being achieved as the person responsible for doing the corrective action gets notifications in order to complete the corrective action. Here we can see how we are currently controlling our documents. So each document has a number and are allocated in a folder with someone responsible to manage that particular document. And you are also able to have an audit log with all the changes made to the document. We also have an approval workflow which shows who are responsible to review and approve the document, as well as the key staff that will be notified whenever amendments are done to the document. And you can also enable the periodic reviews, which will prompt a notification whenever the document needs to be reviewed. In here, we have our new supplier management approval system, which in one only screen shows the current situation of each supplier. This screenshot shows several certificates in the management review module awaiting document review. As you can verify, we have all documents there, from growers, fair trade, global gaps, organic certificates to prerequisite programs, in this case the hygiene one. Root cause analysis, as I said previously, is mandatory in the corrective action module. Root cause have been divided in 5 main areas: environment, equipment, materials, people, and process. And within each folder, we have different root causes to facilitate the process. Calibration records are done in a way that if your calibration is not compliant, it will trigger a fail on the results. And last but not least, an hygiene record where not only records the cleaning that has been done, but only links each task with a work instruction and allows the record of the chemicals being used on that day to be recorded as well. Plus, the verification of the area at the end of the process is always recorded in the same record. What were the main obstacles and the benefits of the whole process? What didn't went so well? It was a long, hard process. Working with both systems while having unannounced audits caused a few difficulties. But nevertheless, we still retrieved the same grades as before. Training and engaging of staff took some challenge and was demanded a lot of persistence and moral boosts as a new process was being implemented. Good internet connection is key in order for the whole process to work. The main advantage of the process are it's a cloud-based system where you can access wherever you are. This was one of the main advantages under current COVID-19 pandemic when we all were sent to work from home. All the teams across the business are using the system, which has helped with food and safety culture and continuous improvement. And for the fact that everybody is working or everybody office-based is working from home, still kept us compliant as everyone could access the system. Systems prompts revision of documents, taking the pressure of making sure all documents are reviewed according to the requirements. All compliance system is in one only software program. And thanks to the new system, our last BRCGS audit was stress-free, and we have achieved top grade for the first time ever in the history of the company. Was it worth it? Definitely it was worth it, and I recommend anyone in doubt to have the courage to give that leap of faith, because the benefits in the long run are worth all the hard work that is behind the transference of the systems. So if you are in doubt, don't hesitate, do it. I would like now to hand back to Matt to share with you a digital readiness level tool.
Thank you, Bárbara. Okay, one more slide to share with you, and this one I think is the fun one. This is the one where you get to do some stuff. This is where you get to find out where you are on your digital journey. So a couple of years ago, the High Value Manufacturing Catapult, Digital Catapult, Innovate UK got together. We created an online tool called the Digital Readiness Level Tool, the DRL tool. And there's 2 questionnaires that go with that. There's a coffee break questionnaire and also a full questionnaire. What I'd recommend, just for interest, maybe straight after this seminar as a bit of post-seminar work, have a go at the coffee break questionnaire. Okay, it's 5 or 10 minutes, it's dead quick to do, and it will give you some ideas where you are as a business on your digital journey. Okay, And then that may inspire you to then do the full questionnaire, or perhaps start the whole journey of thinking about your digital roadmap. And if you remember from my presentation, I really want you to focus on coming away from this thinking about creating some kind of roadmap or connectivity diagram to try to work out what digital systems you've got, which ones you are and aren't using, which ones are driving value, which ones aren't, and so on. If you do need more support, that's no problem at all. You can email the address down there, info@drl-tool.org, or you can email the team at IFST, who will also be able to support you in starting your digital journey. Now, if you are an SME and you are interested in doing this, then at MTC, we have a special fund set up for SME businesses. And a lot of the catapults also have this a similar fund, but if I talk about our one, because I know it the most, it's a 50-50 funding program up to about £30,000. So we'll fund half of it if you fund the other half. And that can obviously be focused on doing a full digital assessment. Okay. Not saying that you need that much money to do it, but that's the upper limit. Okay. And it's called SME Reach. And again, that's got the URL just there. So if you're interested in getting funding, that makes perfect sense. However, if you're not an SME, but you have got SME suppliers, then I would strongly recommend that you encourage them to maybe look at that digital readiness level tool as well, because often when we've been on site working with the bigger clients, it's the smaller clients that can be more challenged when it comes to digital connectivity and digital tools. Okay, and often a lot of them don't have the capacity, haven't got the skills, and maybe just don't have the time to be able to look into this type of technology. And I'm saying that the SME Reach team are here to help with that. They do it a lot in other sectors outside of food and drink, and I really want to get the total number up of companies who are interacting with this in this particular space. Don't forget, of course, if you want to go big digital as well, there are bigger grants available, such as the Smart Grant. Obviously, that's the generic catch-all one, tends to be very, very well subscribed. So you have to be careful. Your bid has to be very, very special. And also, there is Manufacturing Made Smarter is currently open now. And again, programs around supply chain connectivity, digital connectivity are all well within the scope of that. And again, I've just added a couple of those URLs just so that you can take a look at them separately. Maybe something you might not necessarily look at, but having done this seminar, obviously you've got some interest, so why not go and take a look? Great, so thanks very much for listening. I'm now going to hand you back to Andy.
Thank you, Matt and Bárbara, for such interesting presentation. We're now going to move on to today's Q&A session. And just a reminder for those that haven't submitted questions yet, you can submit questions using the Q&A function, which should be at the bottom of your screen. So I'm going to move on to the first question that we've got, and it's to Bárbara, who sort of just mentioned that senior management approval, but I can imagine, was it hard to get that senior management approval, Bárbara?
It took some work. It wasn't art, but it took. What did I have to do? Obviously, I planted the seed in our monthly meetings of the need of doing something in order to work better as a technical department. Then I had to do that research I told you about, all the softwares that were in place. And obviously, when I present the case to the senior management team, I had a very strong case built around the software I wanted to introduce. And also I showed them what would be the benefits at the long run, not immediately, but in the long run, what would be the benefits. And after I present that case study to them, they actually went away, thought about it, and gave me the approval.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Matt, for you, what sort of makeup would you be looking for to make a successful team to deliver digitalization on a site?
It's a good question, and I think from my point of view, obviously I've mentioned a lot about having both the food technical teams, the food production teams, and also the IT team working together. One of the challenges that we've come across in the past is not all of those groups actually report to the same, let's say, C-level exec or the same leadership team. So it can be a bit of a challenge, but I would definitely recommend a multifunctional team who are experienced on both production issues, who know what's happening within the business around IT programs, and also those who have a technical or regulatory compliance role, so that they can obviously balance any of those discussions or selections of software with that experience and skill. I'd also recommend a good mix of age within that team as well, because certainly we know a lot of digital enabled people are young people, especially in my house, you know, I think having that good mix is definitely in there. But I also think it needs to be an open team, and it needs to be drawing on experience of production, you know, both good and bad. And often we have found is that the IT team are usually more aware of the programs going in cross-site than they are on individual sites. So sometimes having a team that can actually span multiple sites, if you do have them, can be very effective.
Okay, another one. How easy or difficult is it to audit a digitalized system?
I don't think it's difficult at all, and I can give you a very good example on this. In 2018, I had the same BRC auditor that audited me this year. So in 2018, when we were doing the transferring of the process, we had actually 7 non-conformance on our audit. This year, we actually had 2 non-conformance this year. The audit was stress-free, completely stress-free. I have to be honest, usually at the end of an audit, I'm completely drowned, like blank, because it's really stressful. And this time it wasn't. Because of COVID-19 and all the situation, obviously I was presenting all our records in a screen, in a TV screen, so contact was avoided and so on. And the auditor loved it, and the flow of the audit was so good, comparing to previous years, that really I'm not going to go back ever.
Yeah, and I think it's really positive message. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. But I think one of the things is that once these systems become more standardized, then there will be audit processes for these digital systems. And I mentioned earlier about the aerospace system. There is a whole audit trail, MPQP, that fits within the supplier train. So effectively, as a supplier signs up, they also sign up to a supplier accreditation scheme. And I totally see that in the future that will be a fully digital system, so that if a new supplier is brought on board, then it's very, very easy to do it. One of the early challenges we had early on within this digital journey was trying to work out if we can reduce the reaction time to recall to a matter of minutes rather than hours, and talking to people like Bárbara and others in her role, trying to do a food recall is very challenging because of the sheer amount of paper. And I'm always amazed when I go to the warehouse where the packaging stores are. You see all the packaging, then above that are boxes of paper, and I often think, crikey, I wouldn't want to have to get through there. So, I think there's an opportunity here for the industry to lead itself, obviously with the IFS team probably at the front would be great to kind of come up with what those digital auditing systems would look like, so you can audit to a standard of the software system as well. But one thing I would say is don't become reliant on the software. We don't want to get to a situation where we're so reliant on the software that we're not asking questions why.
Thank you, Matt. Another one for Bárbara. Do small growers have access to the cloud to input data?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest advantage we had in using this software. Is actually we have a supplier portal, so the suppliers are linked to the platform directly, and they can upload the certificates themselves, and then we just need to approve them. So that was one of the major advantage of the system.
Okay, and once the data is up there, certification data, are you able to verify it from?
Yes.
Yeah.
The system in itself requests me to approve any document that the supplier will upload into the system.
Okay, thank you. Matt, I think you made reference to this in your presentation in terms of iPads and whatever in high care environments. And is it possible to use adapting software and more likely hardware into these sort of more aggressive environments of water and steam, etc. Is there stuff out there that's easily available?
It's yeah, absolutely. And again, I'd say thank you to my food clients for guiding me on this one, because I just figured you could take it in.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are some businesses already that are using tablet-based systems anyway, and they're using a ruggedized type tablet. So not necessarily what we would have, perhaps for everyday use, but something that is designed for extreme environment. And to be honest, from companies like, I don't know, let's say a Microsoft or Dell or someone like that, they actually have that as an option, which is a waterproof, drop-proof type product. But of course, they do still contain glass,
Yeah.
so it does still need a separate audit as to whether or not obviously the product has been damaged. One of the things we have noticed is there is a little bit of a reluctance, and I totally agree with this from a health and safety point of view, that if you are carrying a tablet in your hand, that obviously only leaves one hand free. And obviously a lot of sites that I've been to, it's two hands for the rails, which is why with the case study with Cargill, the wearable technology was a real benefit, because it meant that it was still two hands free for slips, trips and falls. So I think probably in food, I think there'll still be a place for tablets. I do see a lot of computers, which are normally covered in stuff, there's the stainless steel ones, but I think there'll be an increasing use for wearable stuff. And we've seen a lot of that already with both the HoloLens, the Vuzix, and so on, where they are like a head-mounted wearable device where you do still have two hands free. So I think, yes, there's stuff already available, but I think also there's a bit of development coming in this space as well.
Absolutely. And what about, can you run more than one production process in the same program?
I'll jump in on that one, but yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
Of course you can. Yeah, I mean, the modern dashboarding tools, the off-the-shelf tools that exist, you're able to see links of multiple systems running together. Yeah. And currently, when you look at some whiteboards or production whiteboards, you'll see that they've got like a QCD, quality cost delivery type stuff, already being measured on a dashboard basis. It's been my experience that a lot of those whiteboards aren't used, and often there's a lot of whiteboards that are just blank. Yeah. But I think when you have a digital tool, you can quickly scroll to the data that's actually relevant to what you want. But I'd be interested to see what Bárbara says on that one.
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
It was about running multiple programs under the same software. So, essentially in your case, you've got a dashboard. You can see multiple things that are going on. It's, whether it be supply approval, whether it be hygiene or laboratory results, you've got all that capability, I guess.
I think that was one of the advantages as well of the software, especially with the COVID-19 situation, pandemic, where in our case, in our business, the decision was made like from one day to the other. Everyone that works in the office and can work from home, go home. Mm. So we basically, because I had the software I kept compliance. And actually it's funny because some of the employees sometimes send me emails saying, Bárbara, do you have access to CCTV cameras? Because you can spot everything. Because from the system, yes, I can see if they are complying, if they are making the records. And that is the advantage, especially being in the situation we are at the moment. So it's really an advantage in that sense.
Yeah, and it's not just having to work from home. It's also, you may be a company that has multiple sites. Exactly. And therefore, and it doesn't matter whether you're in QA or engineering or supply chain, being able to look at what's going on at those individual sites without having to be there is a significant advantage.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Bárbara, another question for you. Was your software developed in-house or off the shelf? And the second part, if off the shelf, did you find you had to fit your system to the software, and did you have to compromise? So was it in the house or off the shelf?
No, it was off the shelf.
Okay, and then off the shelf, what did you have to adapt to match what the software did, or did the software change to match what you were doing?
That was one of the great advantages that I choose this software, is that, like I said, the process was a 12 months process, and we were doing the process side by side with software team. Right. So obviously there was compromises from each side, but I haven't had to change a lot, and the things I actually had to change actually improved the system. To be honest, but it was we work side by side. And that was the advantage of it.
Okay, thank you. Matt, anything to say on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think when when I was talking about the idea of a roadmap, one of the first things we do when we look at a digital journey or any factory's journey on automation or productivity, we start with a value stream map, which is basically trying to document the processes going through. And while quite a few businesses have those, they often lack the detail that's needed for development of software systems. So again, it comes back to that idea of having a strategy. You know, how do you want to do it? How do you want to connect? But I very much echo Barbara's comments. There are a lot of startup businesses, SMEs. They don't have to be the big blue chip companies that are able to support and are super flexible, because obviously they're developing this stuff nowadays from home. You know, so it's very easy to work with some of these companies. And I particularly liked Barbara's approach where a lot of it's on the cloud. And I must admit, I only know of one factory that is using a cloud-based system. All the rest tend to have local implementations, but I certainly think that cloud will be the way to go forward because of the cost differentiator and the level of flexibility that you get with it. It does mean that you do spend money on cloud credits, so it drives a different revenue model, but we're trying to run a project now which actually tries to connect the factory to the cloud, to actually start thinking about how to do scheduling and so on. So it's a very interesting time, I think, for remote-based data. I think without COVID, we may not have got to this point as quickly as we have. So in many ways, you know, having a big disruptor like that this year has been a major help in digitalization because it's forced people to make a decision.
Absolutely, and going back to, if you like, the history or the rationale for these set of webinars that we're doing, it basically was an output from the COVID-19 advisory group and a seminar we ran there, where I touched on some of the technologies that are coming to the fore and accelerated because of the crisis. I think you've probably already touched on this as well, Matt. It's a question about how much of the industry you feel in the UK has invested in cloud-based systems.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I want to quite stick my neck out and say how many.
Percentage-wise.
Yeah, that's it. I might be held to it because you are recording it. I haven't seen a lot of it. I've certainly seen a lot of in-business sharing, so VPN systems where one site's connected to another. That's definitely the case. Actual cloud systems are still quite rare, but those who are using dashboarding tools, so business intelligence tools like you know, Spotfire, Tableau, and so on, those do rely on cloud connectivity. One of the bigger issues with those is that I've found is that they lack that granularity. So if you remember, part of my presentation was talking about the low-level connectivity for things like conveyors, you know, and so on, where they have PLCs which can connect to the internet. Often they're not, so they are missing a lot of that data. So we do find that there is a missing lower layer, which often those tools actually need to help with things like productivity and efficiency. The irony is quite a lot of those systems already have it built in. It's just not turned on, or as I said, specified from the beginning. So, you know, there is again that disconnect between the purchasing side buying machinery and the IT strategy or the digital strategy saying, actually, we need everything to be cloud enabled, so at least we're ready when we go into that space.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Bárbara, did you have something to say on that?
No, I just want to say that Matt is quite right. And during his presentation, I was just nodding. In fact, a good connection to the internet is basic. At the moment, with the software we are using, and our IT team at Pratt is working on it, is if I go to the end of the building, I lose connectivity. So when I'm doing my audits, I just need to remember that I need to stop that, because after that, I lose connectivity. So they are working on that, but it's really vital, obviously, to have a good connection to the internet, obviously.
And if I may with that one, it's been interesting because we've actually started to have a few requests for 5G for this, because of the sheer scale of some sites, and I'm sure SH Pratt is the same. Some of these sites are colossal, and actually to roll out Wi-Fi points is significantly expensive. And so it becomes a blocker. But the thing about 5G is that it does actually allow wide area connectivity and high bandwidth. The other interesting thing is that you don't have to put the masts in yourself. So you can actually apply to have masts put in and so on. So it can cover big site connectivity, but then obviously you need to switch in your connectivity between Wi-Fi to 5G. And I was recently told by one of my colleagues at Cargill that that Microsoft is now doing a 5G connectivity dongle for the HoloLens. So there's obviously a bit of a move towards maybe shifting away from Wi-Fi to a wireless network system that's maybe not even your own. So we've spoken about clouds, we've spoken about wireless systems and so on. So it's very much a shift away from that ownership model to more of a leasing rental model. And I'm interested to see how the industry reacts over the next, say, 5 years or so.
Okay, thank you. What I think you touched on this, Bárbara, was accountability of inputting data, QC checks. I seem to remember there was, who does the check, or what time they do the check. That's recorded on the system, isn't it?
It is recorded on the system to the minute, I
Yep.
have to be honest. And obviously, if they are not, if a record that was supposed to be scheduled to be done is not done, it comes up on my actions to be done. So I got a notification, or the manager gets a notification that that record is not being done. So you are always on top of the situation, even if you are not physically present.
How do you verify it's the actual person completing that record?
So it's a digital signature.
Right.
So each employee has their own login details.
Yep.
So obviously, if you log in with their name, the digital signature will come up on the record.
Okay, thank you.
If I can add to that, actually, that's a really interesting point, because I've seen systems defeated around that, which are where people are clocking in, clocking out for their colleagues on those systems, whether it's thumbprint or barcode scan. One of the really interesting things about the HoloLens, and I don't want to harp on about it, but it just happens to be that it's got it in there, is it has full iris recognition. So when you actually put the unit on for the first time, it recognizes and logs your iris. So it knows who's wearing the headset. Now, you might think that's slightly creepy. We thought they were going to take it out, but they have actually left it in, and eye tracking. So, once we become really familiar with systems that Bárbara has, then the next step is with a wearable system, then it's almost doing that, almost like undefeatable confirmation that it is actually that person. And there was a question around blockchain that I just spotted.
Yes.
And I think one of the big challenges with that is around the authentication part. And I think we need to move to something better, because I've seen lots of systems being used, such as thumbprints, and they just don't work very well. So it may be that wearables has actually the key to that, while currently we're reliant on things like RFID tags, swipes, digital signatures, passwords, and so on. So I'm interested to see if technology can't fill the gap to solve that particular problem.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we'll do the blockchain question now, which is for Matt, really. Have you seen any workable solutions of blockchain in the food industry beyond proof of principle? And are they seeing a return on investment?
Unfortunately, on a camera, I can't necessarily lie. If I'm honest, I would say no. The reason that I've not seen one is because I fundamentally missed myself what the value that blockchain actually gives. So I know about authentication traceability. I've been to tons of the presentations. I work closely with the Future Food Innovation Network and so on, with people like Simon at Lincoln. So I'm really aware of where we are with that digital space. But I think at the minute we haven't been able to show that real key value piece for businesses as to why it's something they want to do. Plus also businesses that are handling tons of products an hour would create such a colossal amount of data. The question I've always had is, what would they do with it? Now, the point I mentioned earlier about traceability or doing product recalls or anything like that, clearly that's got a great aspect. But then also I've heard it being used potentially on things like horse gate, challenging that. But again, DNA sampling, and I've been told that there can be up to 50 different trace DNAs and things like minced beef and so on. So again, it all comes down to that level of understanding and granularity. Now, one thing I have spotted, and I think is quite relevant, is something I mentioned on one of my slides, which is around continuous quality. So this is where the line is continually measuring the quality, because at the minute it's still based on discrete interventions, based on, as Bárbara said, certain times and certain processes. I think as we move towards continuous quality assessment, and whether that's through sensoring, or automated measurements, camera systems. I mean, Bárbara mentioned CCTV. That's definitely something we're very interested in, because all food sites have CCTV and it's cheap to put in. I think a decent program of work over the next, let's say, 3 to 4 years that enables all of those, so you have continuous quality, will be a level towards moving towards blockchain. As far as return on investment goes, currently, no, I've not seen anything that actually shows a clear return on investment, because if I'm honest, I'd probably welcome a robust discussion with Claire on that one as to what as a business they would consider a good return, and I can only see negative impacts currently at the minute.
Yeah, I'm with you on that in terms of, I think there's a lot of work to be done before people embrace blockchain or digital ledgers. In terms of what we talked about today, in terms of digitization, moving away from paper and getting records into a form where blockchain shows an advantage. Okay, I'm going to draw a close to that. Thank you, Matt and Bárbara, so much, and thanks to everyone from across the globe for attending the webinar today. If we didn't manage to answer your questions, please contact the speaker directly. The details should appear on the screen shortly. And there they go. Thank you. And finally, we'd like to remind you, those of you not familiar with the IFST, that you can find useful resources on our website, including our COVID-19 Knowledge Hub. And I mentioned the work that we did as part of the COVID-19 advisory group, and our online food science and technology magazine. We always welcome new members, so please check our membership benefits on the IFST website. Thank you once again, Matt and Bárbara, and everyone for attending today. Goodbye, and enjoy the rest of your day.